Hi guys, Miss Hathaway here, and this is Dividing It Up. So in this standard, we will be learning about NC2G3, which means partition circles and rectangles into 2, 3, and 4 equal shares. And breaking this down even further, we're going to be describe the shape using the word halves, thirds, half of, a third of, fourths, fourth of, quarter of. We will also be able to describe the whole as 2 halves, 3 thirds, and 4 fourths. We'll also be able to explain that equal shares of identical whole need not to have the same shape. So let's break that down. We will be able to partition or divide into parts rectangles and circles of various sizes into 2, 3, or 4 equal parts, meaning, like we said previously, a whole, half, thirds, or fourths. So our learning targets, I know I can. I know I can partition a circle and rectangle into 2, 3, or 4 equal parts. I know I can describe equal shares with words, halves, thirds, fourths, etc. I know I can describe a whole by the number of equal parts. 2 halves make a whole, and etc. I know I can explain and give examples to show that halves, thirds, and fourths of an equal identical whole need not to be the same shape, meaning half of a rectangle can be shown horizontally or vertically. Here are our essential questions. How do we understand shapes and their attributes? How can you use fractions to name parts of a whole? How can you use fractions to name parts of a set? So by the end of this week, you should be able to answer these 3 questions. Here are some of our vocabulary. I would suggest either pausing or taking a screenshot of this slide. So 1/3, one of 3 equal parts of a whole, thirds, the parts formed when a whole is divided into 3 equal parts, 1/2, one of 2 equal parts of a whole, halves, the parts formed when a whole is divided into 2 equal parts, 1/4, one of 4 equal parts when a whole is divided into 4 equal parts, and fourths, the part formed when a whole is divided into 4 equal parts. This is also an anchor chart. This is very important information. I would suggest screenshotting or pausing and writing this down. So we will be able to represent a fraction using a number line. And on this number line, you can see that it has fourths, it has a half, and it has 3/4. It can also be represented as parts of a set. So like these 3 stars, you have 1/3 shaded. So 1 out of 3 stars are shaded. You can have 2 halves, which equals 1 whole. So these 2 half circles equal to 1 whole. You can also have 2/4 of 1/2. So these 4 hearts, you have 2/4 or 1/2 shaded. Parts of a whole. So you have these 3 shapes at the bottom. You have 2/3, 1/2, and 3/4. So let's try this out. How do you divide shapes into 2, 3, and 4 equal parts? Well, this is how you can do this. The circles are divided into equal parts. You use the number of equal parts to name the parts. So here the red one is 1/2. It has 2 equal parts. The one next to that has 1/3. That has 3 equal parts. And the one in the green is 1/4, which also means 4 equal parts. So think about equal parts cover an equal amount of the shape. I also want you to think about sharing a sandwich with a friend. Though most of us don't like sharing, it's good to share. You want each part to be the same size. So these 2 squares right here, this square shows equal parts. So each person gets the same amount. In this square, one part is bigger than the other. So this is not an equal part. Now, here's an example. You can pause and give yourself a chance to think about it. Draw another way you can share a sandwich equally with a friend. Use the use the square at the right. So give yourself a 2 to 3 second pause and be thinking about what is another way that you could divide equally this sandwich with a friend. Here's how I would have divided. I would divide it right down half. You can divide it horizontally. Now remember, a way to remember horizontally, think about the horizon. The horizon goes from left to right, right to left. So when you look at the ocean, that's the horizon. It goes straight across. Think about equal parts can have different shapes. These shapes are the same size. Each smaller shape covers 1/4 of the square. So each smaller shape is an equal part of the square. So I also want you to think about this note over here. Divide the square in half, then divide each half in half. So what they did, they took this square, divided it in half, and then divided each square in half. They did the same thing with this square. Yes, this is an equal part, and this is still equal part, because even if I was going to share this with a friend, each person would be getting us equal part. You could also divide it in 4 parts. So that would also have been equal. These squares are the same as the ones above. Each is divided into 3 equal parts, or thirds. So each smaller shape is an equal part of the square. So just like above, they did the same thing, but instead they divided into thirds. Now, reflect. I've already given you the answer, but you could have came up with a different answer. I want you to draw 2 squares that are the same size as the one above. Divide into fourths and 1 into thirds in different ways than above. Which parts are bigger, the fourths or the thirds? And explain. So, you could have had thirds are bigger since there are fewer parts. They take up more space than fourths. Just an important note. What if there's more parts? Just like I've noted before. Just remember, the more sections that are divided in the shape, the smaller each one is. So that means if I have a candy bar and I divided that one piece of candy bar in 4 pieces, and then I divided those 4 pieces into another 4 pieces, I now have 8. That candy bar has now been divided into 8ths. Okay? Think of it like that. The more I break it apart, the smaller amount I have. All right, example time. All right, I want you to determine which letter best represents the shaded portions. So for numbers 1 through 12, we have circles and we have squares. As you can see, number 1 and 2 are circles. Number 3 is a square. Number 4, 5, and 6 are circles. 7 through 10 are squares. 11 is a circle, and 12 is a square. I would like for you to take a second and pause the video as long as you need and answer these 12 questions. And when you're ready, hit play. Did you get the same thing that I have here? Number 1 has 2 halves. You see that there are 2 halves shaded. Number 2 has 1 half, only the pink part that's shaded. And number 3, there are 3 halves. There are 3 parts shaded. Number 4, 1 half. Number 5, 1/4. Think of it like having 4 quarters. Okay? Number 6, 2 halves. Number 7, 3/4. Number 8, 3/3. Number 9, 1/3. Number 10, 2/3. Number 11, 4/4. Number 12, 3/4. Here are my resources. I'll see you next week. Bye, guys.